Give me your loot, fat boy. Bite me.
Hi, I'm Danny Boyd. What you're watching is the infamous I Feel Good animation test for Shrek, made back in 1995, the same year the original Toy Story shook the animation landscape in Hollywood. This early footage gave DreamWorks their first glimpse into what their own computer-animated world might look like. And yeah, that was Chris Farley, the original voice of Shrek.
This is one of those drop it and leave me alone things.
Before the character was taken over by Mike Myers.
No, this is one of those drop it and leave it alone things.
The I Feel Good footage was largely unknown until it was finally uploaded online a couple years ago, courtesy of Barry E. Jackson, one of Shrek's original production designers. And while Shrek would eventually become light and color-filled in its final presentation, it was still the mid-90s. The studio wanted things dark, edgy, low budget. That is, until they didn't anymore, and in 1997, when actually shown the test, they decided they made a mistake. It was too dark, too grim, too experimental. New direction, soften it up, appeal to a wider audience, but more importantly, create a character that an entire generation and their parents would fall in love with, which, remarkably, they did. But it wasn't easy. I mentioned Chris Farley.
And he's gonna come back through Chicago on his way to Detroit.
Farley had managed to record most of his lines for Shrek before his death in 1997.
No! I'm an ogre! Doesn't that bother you at all?
Putting out a very different vibe for the character.
No! I'm an ogre! You know, grab your torch and pitchforks. Doesn't that bother you?
DreamWorks had originally asked Farley's brother John to step in and complete the work, but he declined, leading them to one of the most successful hiring decisions in animation, the casting of Mike Myers.
This is my swamp!
Our swamp!
Let go, donkey!
You let go!
Stubborn jackass!
Smelly ogre!
Whose first take with the character actually didn't even use the iconic Scottish accent the character would eventually become known for.
This is my swamp!
Our swamp!
Let go, donkey!
You let go!
Stubborn jackass!
Smelly ogre!
Fine!
But Shrek didn't come together just because it was well cast. And by God, was it well cast.
Shrek and Donkey, two stalwart friends off on a whirlwood big city adventure. I love it!
Why don't you go celebrate your freedom with your own friends?
I think a lot of us who grew up with this character really took for granted just how revolutionary this first movie was. It pushed animation to new limits. It carried the simulation of fabrics, fire, fluids, particles, and hair into wholly new territory. The fourth non-sequential feature-length computer-animated film to come out of Hollywood, period. The second ever to come from DreamWorks. And really the first ever to render human-like faces and feature them prominently from beginning to end, using an evolution of a facial animation system developed for DreamWorks' first film, Ants, and then deepened and extended across entire anatomies, giving characters muscle, weight, and believable generated motion.
We took what was the basis for the near-human facial animation system and anatomically correct sort of body animation systems that were created on ants and took them 20 steps further. Every single muscle underneath the skin is moving with their speech and their facial expressions.
It took Shrek's nearly 300 artists and technicians at DreamWorks 3 years to complete the project, a scope and scale massively unprecedented, 10 times more complex than Ants, with medium shots of characters, for example, consisting of over 800,000 polygons, about 8 times more than anything DreamWorks had done before. 31 sequences, 1,291 individual shots, 63 featured characters, and 36 unique scene locations. Shrek at the time was the most ambitious computer-animated feature film production out there.
This is only the fourth film ever made using the technique, and for something that is so much in its infancy, the sort of leaps and bounds that's happening overnight is really nothing short of breathtaking. If we can imagine it, we can make it.
Thank you very much. I'm here till Thursday.
Sometimes imaginations actually ran too far. Fiona initially was rendered to be what the animators considered too realistic, too true to life.
Our artists were able to do something that was almost photorealistic. It was too good. And so we really had to dial her back to make Fiona fit inside of the fairy tale world, because when she got too photorealistic, she really looked out of place in it. So here's a place where technology allowed us to achieve something that, if we went to the full extent of its potential, actually became incongruous with the look of the film itself.
Look, Princess, you're not making my job any easier.
Well, I'm sorry, but your job is not my problem. You can tell Lord Farquaad that if he wants to rescue me properly, I'll be waiting for him right here.
But even Shrek, as an ogre, had to be as sympathetic and human-like as possible.
You in what army?
And in fact, the rumors say Shrek's final design, though it's unconfirmed, is strongly believed to have been inspired by the real-life Maurice Tillet, the 20th century wrestler known as the French Angel. Again, it was critical that we could relate to Shrek. He needed to move and emote in a way we could understand. Shrek's face alone consisted of roughly 500 control points, allowing the animators to not only demonstrate basic expression, but to blend micro-expressions, anger and embarrassment, joy and sorrow, with that complete muscle animation system beneath the skin to make it all work. Now, this may all seem somewhat pedestrian today. Processing power, rendering techniques, lighting systems, animation has come an unbelievably huge distance in 25 years. But in the late 90s, this was all basically being invented in real time. Tools called shapers allowed skin to bend naturally, lips to stick slightly together before parting, cheeks to compress when someone smiles. And then there was the world itself, which of course had to be built entirely from scratch. Props, sets, trees, hell, the camera itself needed to capture it all.
Inside the computer you have a whole range of lenses, and we swap around just as you would in all traditional photography shooting in live action.
Woo, look at that. Who'd want to live in a place like that?
That would be my home.
The team wanted their virtual cameras to mimic real cinematography, to be grounded in what was physically possible. Animators would then go in with simple 3D stand-ins to begin blocking shots, what they call a layout, going through each action much like rehearsing a play.
Basically, we started off with just a very simple ball, and we just animated the ball at the camera to get the timing right, and they started building their effects on top of that timing. So we would then, we'd have a simplified bunch of triangles just fly out at you, and then it would get slightly more blobby and more detailed, and then finally you see in lighting, you see an amazing effect coming out at you, straight at your face. So we just started off very simply and then build from there.
Hi, princess!
It talks!
Yeah, it's getting them to shut up, that's the trick!
What really made Shrek possible, though, at a time when it took 800 computer processors working in tandem to run through overnight rendering pipelines of millions if not billions of polygons, was the use of shaders. Procedural geometry shaders could generate on-the-fly details like rocks and plants and trees at the time rendering was happening. And to make things even more efficient, some of those shaders were actually multi-purposed.
We actually used fur for grass because it worked out really well. We were able to grow fur from a surface. Well, why don't we just make the fur look like grass blades? And we ended up being able to just elaborate on one shader to make another shader.
Combine all that with the inclusion of fire, mud, dust, smoke, all still very new territory for animation, each to help bring a richness to the world, and all designed with the express intention of completely vanishing behind the story, for its technology to go entirely unnoticed, to be, frankly, for young audiences, taken for granted.
The things that's fun of working on this is not the technology or the techniques that we use, but it's the actual film itself, and entertaining the audience and making them laugh is the important thing.
I like to think of the Shrek that could have been, the weird, grim, low-budget 90s experiment. But ultimately, it's the decisions that were made, the years of innovation, the massive teams of talent that came together and ultimately yielded one of the most important animated films of all time, that made the near-boundless future of computer animation a possibility. And even beneath all the polygons and shaders and particle effects, Shrek never forgot what mattered. Making us smile, making us care, making us love, and most of all, making us believe in magic, in friendship, in the power of movies, and in the importance of human creativity and ingenuity that we need to bring stories like Shrek to life. And in the occasional fairy tale endings. I'm Danny Boyd. This is CinemaStix. Until next time.
Bubble bath, call my name. Every morning up with the sun.